John O'Mahony. I can remember you breaking my heart in 1993 in Tuam Stadium when you steered Leitrim to a win over Galway, and subsequently you had great joy with Galway senior football teams. But I suppose when Galway and Leitrim collide, there's probably memories from your stint with both counties, John.
There is, and very, very lovely memories, to be honest. I was 4 years in Leitrim and obviously 7 years in Galway. And there was as you said there was an amazing link between the two, because Leitrim, when I took over Leitrim in late 1992, actually 92, for the league in 93 league. We met Galway in the championship on the two occasions, 93 and 94. So that game in Tuam at the time was probably, Leitrim were close enough, actually. Roscommon had beaten them by a few points in the previous few championships, and I never expected to find myself in Leitrim, because everything I'd done in GAA up to that was Mayo. But I suppose Mick O'Dwyer started a trend around that time when he went to Kildare, and other counties started thinking about it, and Leitrim were desperate to win a Connacht championship, and I wasn't. I had finished in Mayo in 91, so I got a call, and it all ended up that I ended up there anyway, and had 4 great years there, and I suppose to manage your native county and then to manage, if you like, a county that hadn't won for 67 years and was desperate to get a win, and they wanted someone who had won Connacht championships, and I threw myself into that, and thankfully in 94 it all worked out when we beat Roscommon, Galway and Mayo. So, but I didn't realise the significance actually of defeating Galway in 93 until the papers the next day, like they hadn't beaten them since 1945, I think, and Galway had beaten Leitrim in 4 successive Connacht finals in the late 50s, and all of that. So I only heard that history after we had actually won that. But I suppose the thing I used to say to the Leitrim lads at the time, look at, we had a panel of 26 the year we won the Connacht final. So there was no extended panels of 40, because they weren't there effectively. And in Galway or Mayo, if you lose a championship, the following September or October, when you start the following year, you kind of make changes or bring in maybe 9 or 10 new young faces or whatever. But it wasn't like that. You had to sit down with the Leitrim panel. Maybe you might have 1 or 2 or 3 maybe, but you'd have to say, how do you become better players and not make the mistakes you made last year? And that's effectively the mission that went on, and they just bought into it totally. And I knew when Leitrim beat Galway and Tuam that we were beating a team that probably had a whole lot more talents than us, but our lads at the time were just absolutely would have climbed to the top of the mountain to do anything for success. And I suppose we in management then had to lead the way in doing that. And I suppose that game, I always think of it, I analysed the Galway team more as an opposition team that time than I ever did with any other team, because we had to, it was the small margins, we won it by a point in the last kick of the game. And I suppose in a way the connection with Galway, I felt those 2 years when we did defeat them, I maybe somewhere, I didn't know it at the time, but maybe somewhere there was a seed sown in me. If a team with the population of 25,000 could win a Connacht championship, what would Galway do if they awoke from the slumber that they seemed to be in at the time, because they had just one Connacht title in 95. So look at it, I always call it a great adventure, both in Leitrim and in Galway.
To the current day, I suppose, John, and I'm sure you had a passion for Leitrim football after that, but now you look at Michael Solan and Andy Moore, and two men you know well, and 2 men that you've assisted along the way. Andy Moore is frequently referenced to how you helped his career and that you were always there for advice, etc. So there must be a fondness to see them going into the inter-county arena now too.
Yes, of course there is. Of course there is. And I mean, Andy came to me last year when he was approached by Leitrim, and it had to be his decision, obviously, but I told him, I suppose the difference is maybe that you would have in a weaker county, for the want of a better word, than you would have in the bigger counties. But I was delighted to see himself and Michael, and they're cutting their managerial teeth at intercounty level, although Michael cut that at Mayo in 2016 when he won the under-21 All-Ireland. So they're, and they have two very good lads with them as well. I think it's James Clancy and Barry McQueenie, I'm not sure. But so yeah, it's kind of, it's like rolling back the years a bit, but of course then Pádraig Joyce was one of my main men. So amazingly, over the last number of years, at this stage of my career, when I'm out of intercounty now for 12 years, someone said to me today, I look back with great pride, and it always take a huge interest in former players that I coached, involved now, and watching their career, and if you like, take great pleasure in whatever county it is in their success. Like I had James Horton as an under-21 back in Mayo in '91, and Andy and Michael were on an All-Ireland colleges team with me, and then I had Andy later when I was back a second time in Mayo, and of course Pádraig was there with me for the 7 years in Galway, and there Kevin Walsh, the last manager, Peter Ford, who managed Sligo, and all of that. So there's a whole, Kevin McStay as well was on the under-21 team that won in '83. So there's a good list of lads who I'm delighted to see them, and not just at county level. I think Sean O'Connell, someone told me yesterday evening that he was managing the Orden Moore Mary team that won the Féile at the weekend, and his own son was playing. So it's great to see the assembly line clicking on at every level,
And Declan Darcy as well, I suppose, with Leitrim there, what he's done with Dublin as well.
Declan Darcy with Dublin, I mean, I absolutely. I mean, I could go on. Like you had Martin Carney, who was in the '89 team, managed Mayo under-21s, was selected with me later on. Anthony Cunningham, who I worked with in Bridget's, actually, there was common manager when they won their first Connacht title there in 2006. So there's links everywhere, and that, like, the enthusiasm, it keeps you young, to be honest. I mean, I was in the Mayo Galway game, I was in Castlebar at about 1:30 last Sunday week or whenever it was on, and it was a beautiful day, like a day borrowed from the summer, and I never enjoyed a day like it. Obviously, you're looking at the match as I say in advance of that, you can't win or you couldn't lose, because it was great to see Galway, if you like, making a stand, but I'd have similarly rejoiced if Mayo had won it. It's when you move on, you move on, but you look back and I knew the emotions that both James and Pádraig were going through the last day, and like it could have absolutely gone anyway. And actually, from a Galway perspective now, the draw is the same as it was in '98. It was Mayo first. From a Galway perspective, it was Leitrim then, and it was Roscommon then. So it could shape up for Galway the same as it did back in '98. But anyway, there's a lot of, as we saw last Sunday with Tyrone bombing out of it, there's a lot of twists and turns yet. So maybe Mayo could end up All-Ireland champions in 2022. You never know.
John, where would you see where Galway are at the moment? Obviously, in Pádraig Joyce's reign, a number of young underage players that you'd even know from the club scene in Galway, now with being involved with Salty Loughnacurra, Tom O'Connell, Carl Sweeney, etc. But a number of these players are beginning to acquire experience at inter-county level. But your assessment on where Galway are currently at?
Well, I suppose that assessment would be slightly different post last Sunday week than it was pre-Sunday week. It was the most amazing 2 or 3 weeks from the league final to that match, because I was up in Salthill training, and I was talking to Galway people who were telling me that Mayo would win. And when I came back to Mayo, I had Mayo people saying, after getting a 15-point defeat to Kerry, it was Galway that was going to win. So, you know, you had the opposite view in either county. And I suppose that was the uncertainty that both teams went into that match with. But assessing where are Galway at now, I think they're in a very good place, to be honest, because I'm aware of the injection of confidence and collegiality and togetherness that a win like that in Castlebar would bring them last Sunday week. And, you know, I remember leaving Castlebar on 24th of May 1998, having targeted that game from a way out because, you know, the league is the league and we wanted to do well in it and all the rest of it. But luckily, on that particular year, luckily, as it turned out, we awfully beat us in the quarter-final and went on to win the league. And it was at that stage I said, I better make one last attempt at getting Jeff Allen back to the Galway panel, because I think we needed his leadership, even though we had a very talented team. And it was a couple of weeks after that, when he had finished his rugby involvement for that season, that he rejoined us 3 weeks before we played Mayo. So I think they'll get a great sense of infusion. The fact that, you know, when you come down to it, I mean, I think it should be good for Galway if Leitrim stood up to them the next day as well, because Leitrim had been in a bad place last year. I'll never forget the game against Mayo behind closed doors in Castlebar when it was on telly, and really it was a mixture of sadness and anger that I watched the Leitrim, because I knew that there is a decent crop of players, maybe not enough there at the minute, but there's a decent crop of players, and the body language that day everywhere from a Leitrim point of view didn't do Mayo any good, and it certainly did Leitrim, didn't do them any good, and so Andy and Michael and his management team have injected, you know, a bit of pride back in them, and I think it was a big achievement for them to go to London without their top scorer and win. But at the same time, the gap is wider now than it was back in the day when I was in charge of Leitrim. You know, like that time, if you were well organised, you could be ahead of, you could have a few ambushes, let's say, for the want of a better word, whereas now you don't. So, I mean, I'd expect Galway to come out on top the next day, but, you know, they need, and I know they will treat Leitrim with respect as well. And then I'd feel, you know, that would lead to a Roscommon Galway Connacht final, and the way Roscommon have developed over the last, you know, they rightly kind of would be, I suppose, marginal favourites for a Connacht championship at this stage. But I don't think anyone, you know, if Galway were to get there, I don't think they'll worry too much about that. But they'll want some comeback for the 2 defeats that got them in the league. So that's where I think they're at. And you know, the great thing with Galway over the years is that, and I would have observed this myself, you know, that they could come from nowhere any particular year and actually go on a run. And I think this team, you know, has a good blend of youth and experience. And like what happened in Castlebar is that, like, Kevin Walsh in his later years did mighty work with Galway, but was kind of accused of being too defensive. And Porrick in his early stages was, you know, too attacking. So I think what happened in Castlebar was that Galway got, you know, Porrick and his backroom team, John Divley and Cian O'Connell and John Gannon, they got the balance right on the day. And you know, I thought that they probably deserved to win by more than the point, but fair play to Mayo, you can never say they'll bow the knee.
It's an interesting thing you brought up there, John, about maybe Roscommon going in as maybe favourites into the Connacht final. It's something myself and Cian have discussed a lot. That Roscommon probably don't get the credit they deserve outside of Connacht, maybe for what they're doing with their numbers as well and how well they play.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, the traditional thing for years was that Roscommon kind of won one Connacht title every 10 years or whatever. Now, I know they had a golden period from 76 to 80 when they got to the All-Ireland. They had 4 in a row there. But that would have been, you know, if you put in recent years, like Kevin McStay won, beat Galway in Pearse Stadium. and Anthony Cunningham won the Connacht with them as well. So they're up on their percentage, and like if you think of the league that they just had gone by, they had to do without the Pierce's players and the Folia's players who were intermediate and senior club championships right up for the first few league games, I think, and like they've discovered a few nice young players. You know, there's a Doyle guy there, and there's a Cian O'Connell. And the strength of the Roscommon team seems to be in the attack as well, you know, which is a good place to have your strength. So they are very much a factor, but obviously they'll be looking on with interest, very good interest on Sunday to see how Galway will progress after beating Mayo.
For yourself, John, to go back into, I suppose, back into Galway with Salthill and Knocknacarra, there's plenty of interest around. Obviously, it's a different championship window now with the split season, etc. But I'm sure it's something that you're enjoying preparing for the challenges that'll come in August and September, etc.
Ari, of course, yeah, and like it's a massive club, you know, and I suppose it's a club, and I think it's no secret to say that every other club in Galway probably loves to beat. You know, it's a kind of but it's a massive club, and they have done huge work at underage and all of that. I suppose the big difficulty they have is their facilities at the minute. They have effectively one pitch for 52 teams. Like, you know, we're training out in Kappa and various pitches. You know, that's but you know, I know that the club have a long-term plan for that. But yeah, look at it's the fact that the backroom team that I have with me is totally Salthill, and it should be on that condition that I'd have gone in there, because, you know, this thing needs to be to transfer the underage success into senior success. It's not going to happen overnight, but it is something that needs to be driven from within the club, and it is being driven from within the club. And, you know, I'm delighted to have Norman Costello and Sean Armstrong and Fidian Hanley and Des Sheeran with me, and all of that, you know, to kind of try and put a bit of shape and a bit of structure on it. And hopefully that's, I mean, the aim of every club should be to have a manager within their own club, and hopefully, you know, that will happen, you know, in the next couple of years as well, so that there'll be basically structures put in there, and that it'll be managed from within the club then, you know. So, but look at it's a nice. I'm enjoying it because I'm retired from most other things at the minute, and gives a bit of structure in my life and all that, you know.
Your passion for sport, though, John, it endures.
It does, of course, and I suppose that you know, GAA and football has been my whole life, outside family and all of that, you know, and yeah, and I enjoy every minute of it. And I mean, I think back, and you know, I was lucky to be entering the management game when I did. It was more innocent times, really, you know, when I think of, you know, I was talking to someone about this Leitrim Galway game during the weekend. I said, you know, the backroom team in Dublin in the last few years, they had a picture there in Crow Park one day. I think there was over 30 people in it. In Leitrim, when we won in '94, we had 26 players on the panel, you know. That was the extent of it, and we didn't. It wasn't that the county board cut me back on numbers. It's just so it's gone so sophisticated in a way. There was maybe more. It's gone to a tipping point at the minute, like where, you know, we see all this thing about the dispute recently with the GPA and the GAA about all, you know, players nearly training 7 days a week as such, or maybe with one rest day. It wasn't like that back then, and I suppose you know, there's a happy medium. But like when I think we won 2 All-Irelands in well, not the '98, but the 2001 and 2002, and which we won out of two 40-foot containers up in Lockgeorge. There was no dressing rooms at the time, and all the gears and football and bollards and cones and stuff were in my boot. And you know, when you see now, and it's great to see the advances that are made, but it's a manager nowadays has to cope with, if you like, a backroom of maybe 10 or 15 people in most counties. So you're managing the team and you're managing your backroom, and it can even be more complicated. There's advantages in it where things can be totally delegated, but it's changed. Let's put it like that.
And we can see behind you there in the wall, John, like your memories, like, you know, the fondness pictures of the Galway team, Leitrim team, and Mayo team, like, you know, they're great memories you have created over the last of your time involved in management, and especially when you go into it as such a young man because of injuries and stuff. Like, you've a long time involved.
I was, yeah. Sure. Look at it. It just showed, like, when I won a minor and under 21 All Ireland as a player, but never fully made it as a senior. I played in 2 Connacht finals. Lost both of them narrowly at one after a replay, and basically my senior intercounty football career came to a halt. But you know, I threw myself into the GAA in whatever way I could. After that, I was secretary of the club. I was training teams in St. Athie's College. I was chairman of board and OG in the club, and that, like, it was someone's. I trained Balladreen senior team actually when I was playing it. Back as far back as 1976. Now, if you start counting the years, that's for, you know, sometimes people say, well, you know, you should take over. But I was a selector with Frank Kelly actually there that we talked about in 2006, in between Galway and coming back to Mayo. But you know, that you might take them over, as I took them over 45 years ago or whatever it is, you know. So I think the be sick in my voice, but look at it, yeah, you know, I was county board delegate, I was registrar of the county board, so the whole gambit, refereeing, I used to refereeing as well. So my whole thing was, you know, GAA of my life, and I don't regret a minute of it, to be honest. You know, I enjoyed every bit of it, and it's nice to look back. You know, and I suppose during the lockdown, you know, I was over the years, I was whatever a span of 30 years involved in intercounty management between all the counties, and because that even surprised myself when I finished up, because I didn't realize, but I hadn't. It was just moving from one thing to another. You were so busy, and I had great fun in the last 2 years during lockdown, getting old newspaper cuttings and all this videos that we used to make up and for pre All Ireland nights and all that kind of stuff. Some of them they were all done on VHS. It shows again the era we're in. Like, and some of them are damaged now, which I regret totally, because I had great, you know, the motivational stuff and the music and all the stuff behind it. But some of it is saved anyway.
Man,
in the lockdowns, John, in the lockdowns was the value of sport underlined, that when people maybe went 4 months, 2 years ago without any sport, that it was so hard for people to cope when they didn't have a match to go to, a team to watch.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I suppose it for me it's epitomized the you know, the mental health thing, or you know, the comfort. It is only when something is gone. I mean, we take so much we turn on the taps and the water comes out and whatever, and you take it for granted until it's gone. And sport was like that. The tap was turned off, you know, and you know, and even the matches at the empty stadiums, like, you know, it was great. I must say, you know, the reporting and the streaming and the TV and stuff, it was brilliant when it did eventually come back up again. But when the games were gone altogether, it was a lonelier country, I would say. And, you know, in not just GAA, but soccer and the whole lot, rugby and the whole lot, it was, you know, the world was nearly turned upside down, you know.
Yeah,
it was great to have it back. And that's why I say, I suppose the last Sunday week in Castlebar was the first time, you know, 25,000 crowd and everyone in their colours, and whatever, and the people, you could see the bounce in them, you know.
Because I say it was a strange one even for the likes of myself and Cian, who were lucky enough to go to that All-Ireland final in 2020. But like, it was such a, I actually can remember very little of it, because without the crowd, the game, you know, the build-up was just a very strange time. Like
the echoes of the pitches nearly, I suppose, and like I've been at every All-Ireland since 1970. I was at 71. I played in the minor final. I missed actually 72, even though I could have gone, but it was exams or something. But I was at every All-Ireland since that, which is over 50, and I missed obviously the 2 lockdown ones, you know. So it's like an annual pilgrimage to All-Ireland finals and stuff. So but it must be. I mean, you were there in the lockdown days and reporting on it, but it was a strange couple of years. Let's put it like that, you know.
One last thing, John, before I let you go, I suppose on Sunday you're called. How far do you think Galway can go this year? Do you think they can make, watch things realistic, quarter-final, semi-final, or final? Would you say for them?
Well, look at it. I mean, what I'd say is, as I say, I hope they get a test from Leitrim, and I would expect that they would. But ultimately they'll win. That's the way I see it. And I think whoever wins, I think Galway will have huge incentive to win that Connacht final. Roscommon will too, because they'll want to confirm what they've done already. But I think Galway will be in a better place, and it'll be a hard one to call. But whoever gets through it can advance to, you know, to be like, I think whatever, like Dublin haven't gone away as we've seen in the, you know, recently, but at the same time they won't be as far ahead of everyone as they were. But Galway certainly could blossom, if they get over it. You asked me about Galway specifically, and if they did get over a Connacht final, like the tradition of Galway again is when they get to Croke Park, they can really blossom. I was lucky enough in '98 to see that happening in front of my eyes, and you know, like the history of that was, I think the Derry team were on a weekend away. They had watched. They had been on a weekend away. They had played the Ulster final the week before. We were playing the replay in Connacht, and they were all at our game. And I think they left kind of saying that I won't have much trouble with these lads anyway. And as it happened, we had it won by half time, you know, more or less 10 points to 4 or something. And so Galway have the happy knack of doing that. And I think the culture of that, and Cian would know this, like they're winning All Irelands at some level, or whether it's camogie or ladies football or hurling or something, most years, like, and there's a kind of a winning culture, and they keep their feet on the ground until they actually have it won. So they have a good winning tradition. But I'm not saying they're the finished product, and they're not either. They have, like, they'll be, you know, but I think it's good that they have to work on that situation where they Mayo nearly pipped them at the post in the end. So that's a great thing for them to have to work on to get that right. And there'll be a presence, and they're, you know, they needed the win badly from everyone's point of view, but now they're there. So I think that they're in a place that they could certainly go on to quarter-final, semi-final, and who knows what happens after that, you know.
Thanks so much for your time, John. Thanks a million for going through the memories. Thanks a million for giving us so many good memories on the sideline preparing teams, and we hope to chat to you again, and best of luck for the rest of the year with Salthill Lough na Carra.